Hey, I'm Drew. I'm the college minister at Morrison Heights, and I've been doing college ministry for 12 years. And when I first started in college ministry, one of the things that I struggled with the most, that I most wanted, was to have people help me do the work of ministry. Like, no one wants to do ministry alone. And if that's where you're sitting, you're probably wondering, how could I get people to help me do ministry? But the reality is that a lot of times when we think about having a leadership team, starting a leadership team, getting some people around us, we're probably coming at it from the approach of, how can I get help doing the work of ministry? But one thing I've learned over the years, and this is something that's a core conviction for me, is that if we're going to start a leadership team, it needs to be first about the commitment to disciple students. Before we even want to talk about or think about how do I get things done, we need to first have in our hearts that our key commitment is to be a disciple maker, to disciple students to look more like Jesus, act more like Jesus, and let ministry flow out of that. I've led a session called Starting a Leadership Team, and I think there are three things that if I could help you get this, I would be excited. Number one, I would want to, as you think about being a disciple maker, as you think about making a disciple who can make disciples, making a leader who can make leaders, the first thing you need to do is you need to look to Jesus. Jesus is the ultimate disciple maker. In fact, Jesus had a leadership team. He had these 12 guys. He invited them into relationship with himself, and then he challenged them to live out his life and teaching. One of the things that I often miss as a disciple maker is I miss the opportunity to develop leaders by giving them access to my life. In our ministry, one of the core things we believe is that discipleship is accelerated when someone has access to the life of the leader and they want that life. So if I have someone and I invite them into discipleship, I'm going to invite them into my life so they can watch and they can see me. They're not just hearing me speak from the stage or even teach a lesson, a Bible study in my home, but they're watching me on what it looks like to love my wife, love my kids, to be a leader in ministry and in the hard stuff. And so as we give people access to our lives, we're following Jesus, right? That's what he did. He invited the 12 as he walked with them daily, and then he challenged them to live out their teaching. And so before you think about anything else in starting a leadership team, I would tell you, look to Jesus and just ask yourself the question, how did Jesus lead? And then imitate that. And I think what you'll land on is he invited people into a relationship with himself, and then he challenged them to live it out. Number two, you got to understand leadership development. What does it take to take a freshman who arrives on your campus excited and knows nothing and send them out as a graduating senior who's ready to take the gospel to the nations? And there's steps along the way. A lot of times when I started out in ministry, I would just keep waiting for a leader who was ready to lead, and that leader just never showed up. And so I was always frustrated. But what the Lord showed me is that it was my first task not to wait for someone who was ready to lead, but to take the people who weren't ready to lead and help them grow. So in our ministry, we're always thinking about, okay, hey, stage one, these people show up, these college students show up, and they don't know anything, but they're excited to be there. Let's invite them in. Let's invite them into discipleship and begin discipling. But what they'll find is at stage two, they're going to encounter difficulty. And they're going to struggle with the challenges of disciple making, with the challenges of mission, with the challenges of leadership. And that's the critical life-changing moments where I can give those disciples encouragement. I can give them hope that, hey, I've been there too. But more than anything, I can just give them my time and I can be there with them. And then as they work through that hard stages, they learn that I can trust God, even if ministry is not going all the way I thought it would. That's when they start to really become leaders, where they can say, God is in control with confidence. It's not about my gifts. It's not about my skills. It's not about my capacity. It's only about God. Then they're ready to truly lead. And this is the third stage of leadership where our leaders, our disciples are beginning to put things together. Now, they still have to think about everything they do before they do it, but there's some growth starting to happen. They're starting to process information. They're moving towards the final stage, which is a releasing stage, where our leaders now know how to do things and it's second nature to them. It's natural. And these are our leaders who are ready to be released, given additional responsibility. So in our ministry, we're thinking about this over a year-long discipleship process at one level. Like, okay, I've got this person who's never been discipled. I'm going to begin investing in them. There's that time that's going to come where they're going to be ready to quit. I'm not going to let them quit. They're going to start putting stuff together about 3/4 of the way through the semester. And by the end of the semester, they're going to be able to lead their own discipleship group. But also, we think about this in our ministry as a whole. Got that freshman who comes in. Sophomore year, they realize, like, dang, college is actually way harder than I thought it would be. They're struggling with being overcommitted. We're there to walk them through the process, help them learn, hey, college is about more than these 4 years. It's setting you up for where you want to head the rest of your life. Then in year 3, junior year, they start to learn how to lead others. They've gained enough influence on campus that people are beginning to follow them. And then by senior year, we're starting to prepare them to be released to go. So whatever this looks like in your ministry, you need to think about the different stages of leadership development and how you or your staff or your student leaders are going to walk alongside of students through the process. And then finally, you need to transition from there to think, hey, practically, what's this going to look like? And honestly, there's 100 different ways you could tackle your leadership team. Some of the key things for us are number one, you need a clear vision. You need to know what your ministry is about. This doesn't have to be a 5-year plan that's laid out year to year, but you at least need to know what you're about. Like, what are you inviting your leaders into? Then you need to sit down with them, give them clear expectations, what you're inviting them into as they join your leadership team. And then you need to meet with them regularly. I love meeting with my students every week. That makes sense for us. That opportunity, we use that opportunity to not just meet, but we spend about 3/4 of our time discipling our leaders. So me, my wife, some of my staff, some of our recent graduates, we let our leaders know when you commit to leading in our ministry, not only are you going to disciple others, but you're going to have someone who's investing in you, shepherding you through the process, because we want to make sure you finish the race. And ultimately, we want to launch you into the nations. So I really hope you will pray about what does it look like for your church to have a leadership team. And as you do that, you'll look to and learn from Jesus. You'll work to understand leadership development, and then you'll start finally to put some practical steps in place.